The Orphans of Simitra. Chapter 2. Porphyras had a sister, whose name was Marina, though everyone at home called her Mina. She was 10 years old, with sparkling eyes and a face the color of a ripening olive, and hair blacker than the leaves of cypresses outlined against in the sky. Porphyras was very fond of her, without knowing exactly why. Maybe it was because he felt it his duty to look after her, since he was 2 years older than she was, or maybe because Mina was very sweet and very pretty. There had never been a quarrel between them, nor a secret. Porphyras used to tell his sister all the silly things he did, and they were many, knowing that she would never give him away. So when he brought the goats back, Porphyras went straight to his sister. The little girl realized immediately that her brother had something important on his mind by the way he was fumbling with the end of his belt. "Mina, you know my red overalls?" "Yes." "I won't ever have them, nor the cap with the gold braid. They're going to mend the road, I'm sure of it. They've already brought the gravel, and they're going to put tar down. I've seen the barrels." He had not in fact seen any barrels, only his lively imagination made him feel that he had. Mina tried to comfort him by saying that, even so, Papa Christopher would still have work to do. All to no purpose, however, for Porphyras could not be convinced. Mina had always had tremendous admiration for her brother, first because he was a boy, then because he was bigger and stronger than she was, and lastly because he was always ready to climb trees to get pomegranates or figs of her. Once, when he had gone rushing off into the mountains, he had even brought back a tiny newborn jackal for her, and she had looked after it until the day it escaped from its cage. But her admiration, already so great, reached its peak the day Porphyras told her about wonderful red uniform. She immediately saw her brother in his glowing scarlet overalls, standing in front of the handsome Petroglyphs service station, supplying gallons of gasoline. Even the ancient god Zeus sitting on his throne in Olympus would cut a very poor figure beside Porphyras. So now Mina was as miserable as her brother, and her disappointment was as keen as his. 2 days passed, and all the time Porphyras went around frowning and looking worried. Then he said to his sister Mina, "I've got an idea." "I know." "How?" "I just know you'd have one in the end. You always do. Have you still got some money in your money box?" "Not very much, Porphyras." "How much?" "About 20 leptas, that's all." "That'll be enough. What are you going to buy?" "Promise not to tell." "Of course." "Then place your little finger against mine and we'll blow." Mina raised the little finger of her right hand, Porphyras did the same, and they blew on them. That is how children in Epirus pledged themselves to keep a secret. Then Porphyras leaned toward his sister and whispered in her ear a long and rambling explanation. "Oh!" And Mina's mouth grew round. "That's what you're going to do? There's no harm in it, is there?" "I don't know, I think there is." "Don't you want to see me in red overalls and gold braid?" "Of course I want you to have your red outfit, but what would you do, then, in my place?" The little girl hesitated. She found it difficult to reply. She had no wish to hurt her brother, and yet she simply smiled gently at him, lifting her beautiful dark eyes to his face. That was all the encouragement Porphyras needed. "You'll see, Mina. I'll have my red overalls before Pindus is white with snow. Will you go and fetch your 20 leptas?" The little girl went to rummage in the cupboard where she kept her things, took out her money box, a little cardboard box that had once contained pepper, and counted out 12, 15, 19 leptas. "Look, Porphyras, my box is empty box. It'll soon be full again. Soon we'll be rich, and you won't go barefoot anymore. And you'll have a lovely dress with birds embroidered on it." Every evening Porphyras went to the village with the surplus goat's milk. The grocer's shop was a sort of general store, where a little of everything was sold: brooms, long-stemmed Greek pipes, fly swatters, and nails as well. He went up to the drawers containing nails. There were some of every size, but he was mainly interested in the smallest, blue gleaming nails with wide flat heads. "I'll have 19 leptas worth," he said, putting his money on the counter. The grocer's wife placed a sheet of paper on the scales, and Porphyras watched her pouring 1, 2, 3 handfuls of tacks onto it. "As many at that," he said, almost scared by the quantity. His empty can in one hand, his paper full of nails in the other, he left the village behind. It was duty. The sun had just disappeared over the horizon into the invisible sea that stretched, as Porphyros well knew, at the foot of the White Hills. He lifted his eyes to the sky, where the first stars were just beginning to appear, then looked down at his paper bag. Stars, he thought, are a bit like nails fixed in the sky. He smiled at the comparison he had just made, and then it disturbed him. The stars were beautiful golden nails that delighted the eyes of men, while his nails, what use would they be? He was on the point of throwing them away, when the sound of a car humming along the high road reached him. Stars are stars and nails are nails, he said, quickly putting things straight in his mind. He came to the high road. Night was falling. He sat down by the roadside and opened the paper carefully to count his nails. He soon gave up, there were too many. Then he bent down, and put the tack, pointed end up, on the road. It balanced perfectly. These were just the nails he needed. He was filled with rapture. His head whirled with figures, calculations, additions. 400 nails, 400 punctures. It was fabulous. What a lot to drachmas in Papa Christopher's pockets. Before ever the first soft flakes of snow fell upon Pindu's, the gasoline pump would be set up in front of the handsome Petroglyphs service station. He himself would put on his red overalls. For the first time Mina would have her dress with birds on it. Mother, the set of kitchen utensils she had coveted so long, Big Brother Constantine his gun, and Papa Christopher could smoke ration cigars all day long. Gradually night settled down upon the countryside, almost as dark as the yews on the hillside. Porphyros, putting down his milk can, walked to the middle of the road, crouched on his heels, and with infinite care began to put his nails, point upright, here and there upon the surface, saying as he placed each tail, 10 drachmas, 10 more drachmas. He had put down more than 50, that was plenty, though he would have scattered more if an oxen cart, returning late of a farm, had not come along and interrupted him. He ran off home, where his mother was just beginning to grow anxious. Porphyros' home was a very simple one. There was a big kitchen on the ground floor and above it a loft, in one half of which the 3 children slept. It was very hot in the loft in summer, so the children preferred to sleep out of doors, under the big fig tree that sheltered them like the roof. They would unroll their straw mattresses at the foot of the tree and sleep soundly all night long. That evening Mina pulled her mattresses still closer to her brothers, and as soon as they were lying down she asked in a whisper, "Did you put them down?" "Not all still. Papa Christopher will have plenty of work tomorrow." Mina sighed. "Won't he be surprised?" "Oh, he'll only think the road's getting worse and worse." Mina made no reply. But Porphyros, beneath the fig tree that sheltered them like the outspread wing of a mighty eagle, stayed with his eyes wide open, instead of closing them in sleep, his ears strained to catch every sound from the bottom of the hill, where the high road ran by. And he went on counting 50 nails, 50 punctures, 100 nails, 100 punctures. But the more he counted and the bigger the figures became, the less happy he felt. Why, just before she fell asleep, had she sighed like that, as if she were sad? He turned toward his sister, and covered her small hand, holding a branch of wild lavender like a bouquet, with his own. But he dared not wake her up. What could he say? Suddenly, the calm of that warm night, shrouding the Greek countryside like a velvet curtain, was pierced by a beam of light, and almost at once there was the sound of a distant car approaching. He shivered. He was assailed all sorts of ideas that had never occurred to him before. That car approaching, did it belong to some poor local shopkeeper, returning late with his wares, or was it the doctor's car from Simitra, setting out to visit a patient? He listened intently, trying to make out the type of car by the sound of its engine, which he was quite good at doing. It was a steep slope, and old cars rattled as they climbed it. No, the one approaching was not an old bone shacker, it was swallowing up the cedar-lined slope far too easily. It was a big touring car in a hurry. He was filled with sudden joy again, but it was gone in a flash. Suppose children were sleeping in that unknown car, a little girl like Mina resting at ease on its cushions. The car had nearly reached a nail that was among them. A sharp, wicked point stuck into the tire and ripped it. The tire went flat. The car was traveling so fast it skidded and crashed into an enormous cedar. Porphyros sat bolt upright on his pallet, his heart thudding and his forehead damp with sweat. With his nerves stretched to breaking point, he listened. The car had reached the top of the slope. Its headlights no longer swept the sky. It went past the fig tree like a whirlwind and, devouring the night with its great yellow eyes, it disappeared. Porphyros drew breath again, very much relieved, but he was too shaken to calm down. Other cars would go by, and every time he would endure the same horror. He rose to his feet. It was a moonless night, but the stars of Greece shine with such splendor that the nights are never entirely dark. He walked along the deserted road, and came to the summit of a steep cedar-lined slope at the foot of which slumbered Simitra. He recognized the big tree where he had stopped on his way back from taking the milk. This was the place. How could he find the nails again? He knelt down on the roadway, stretched out his hand and felt carefully over the stones. He found only one small overturned nail. "They're not dangerous on their size like that," he murmured. "Let's look for the other first." He began to pat the surface of the road with the flat of his hand, until a sharp point dug into his palm. He put a nail in his pocket, and thought sadly of the beautiful uniform he would not be getting after all. A few inches along, another nail pricked his hand, and farther on, another. Then, one after the other, he picked up 4 nails. He was still at it, trying to pick up tacks until none was left, when a sweeping headlight announced the approach of a car. It was a long way off. He would have plenty of time to move out of the way. On all fours, he went on combing the surface of the road. Here was another nail, perhaps the very one that might have thrown the car against the big cedar. There were still plenty more. In his frenzy, he took no more notice of the lights that showed now left, now right, according to the winding of the road. Here was another nail, another. Suddenly the car was there, at the bend. The road was flooded with a spray of light. Porphyros turned his head, and his eyes were dazzled with the sudden glare of the headlights. In that awful moment he could not remember which side of the road was nearer. The lights mesmerized him. He thought it was coming straight at him. Instead of throwing himself on the grass at the side, he ran right across the whole width of the road. There was a screeching of brakes, a bump, then terrified cries coming from the car. Porphyros felt himself spinning around several times. His arms failed out in a desperate attempt to regain his balance. Then he fell, rolled over onto a pile of stones, and was still. After a terrifying skid, the car came to a halt a few yards ahead. Its occupants flung themselves out and shone a flashlight along the road. "Merciful heavens," said a woman's voice. "We've killed the child." Even as hands were stretched out to him, Porphyros moved a leg, an arm, lifted his head, and opened his eyes. "Where are you hurt?" The question did not seem to reach him. In spite of the sharp pain increasing in his right shoulder, he once more tried to get up, and said, "The tire. The tire. There isn't a nail in it." And he fell back groaning, on his side.